welcoming Sia Madyibi. Sia is Executive Director at Microsoft, looks after the corporate, external, and legal affairs. His job is to look at all the novel regulatory and policy issues and advise and support the Microsoft team. And when it comes to AI, there are lots of novel things that will appear. And I look forward to hearing what you say about how do we overcome these regulatory issues, especially when it comes to ethics, I suppose.
Good morning, everyone. I've been asked this morning to speak more broadly around AI regulation, but more specifically, I think around ethics relating to AI. I normally cover this presentation in about 30 minutes time. I know I only got 10 minutes today, so I'm trying to try and squeeze all in so that we get the gist of maybe where we are and where the market is going. I think it's fair to say that Microsoft is, or at least has demonstrated to be one of the leaders globally when it comes to AI. I think we're in the top 3 companies that have taken the plight of this new wave. And I like the wave that the previous speaker was speaking about now, because you remember we've had the internet, which was a big wave. And I think all of us have clued up on that one. We had mobile. I see everybody else has got their mobile phones, so nobody missed that wave. With cloud, and quite a few companies came forth on that. I don't think more than 5 globally that really became what we call hyperscale cloud providers, and we now have what we call AI, which is the wave that we're in right now. I think Microsoft, in really just anticipating what was going to happen in the market, from a regulatory perspective, I think we became the first multinational to invest from a cloud perspective. Because remember, one of the biggest regulations that we have in this country, and I think if you look across the continent, is around data residency and data sovereignty. And by data residency, what that speaks to is, if I hand you over my data, where is that data going to sit? Is it going to sit in country, or is it sitting in Europe or in the US somewhere? That is very important for especially in the government sector, in sectors. That is extremely important, and therefore becoming that first multinational to make that investment in South Africa to be the first hyperscalers in South Africa, it really just was testament to where we were going. Because everything now that happens on AI, because remember, AI, it harvests data that sits on the internet. And what is important about that data from a regulatory perspective is, where does it sit? Can you keep it locally? So I think as you explore going forward with applying various AI models and products, especially those people that operate within the specifically regulated areas, FSI being one of them, it becomes very important to keep in mind, are you working with a service provider that is keeping your data in accordance with the regulations that the country requires? And data residency being one of those in South Africa. I think what is also fair to say is that, look, with all the promise that AI brings us, there's also huge challenges. I think every speaker that has spoken before me has indicated to the fact that it's an evolving technology. A lot of what we're doing from an AI perspective is changing. To give you a simple example, a couple of months ago, if you were to search even on ChatGPT, you use ChatGPT from a recruitment perspective, and you put in a model to search there for best candidates for a particular role, it will most likely return a male as a successful applicant. And the reason for that is because it's harvesting data that is sitting on the internet. And if you go to the internet, most people that have got their CVs in there are males. So what that tells you that if you don't train the foundational models quite correctly and to be very sensitive to those kind of things, it will come up with a very biased kind of outcome. Another one that you can try now is, for instance, without being offensive to anybody in the room, is if you were to ask AI now to give me a face of a CEO, in all likelihood, it will return a white male. And again, that is based on the fact that if you look across the data that sits on the internet, most people that are at that level are white males. And again, the outcome that AI will give you is based on what's sitting on the internet. So again, we're now talking about what we call sensitive use cases. And that is precisely because we're trying to correct those things so that as the technology evolves, we're managing that and that we're giving out outcomes that are quite fair. And I think from a Microsoft perspective, these are the principles that we follow. We follow those principles mainly because if you look from a regulation perspective, there isn't a lot of regulation that you see, especially in the continent at the moment when it comes to AI. So again, it's that old adage of where the technology is leading the way and the law and the regulations are lagging behind. And we hope that at some point they will catch up. And for instance, South Africa, I think 4 or 5 months ago, issued the first AI national framework, which is at the draft stages now. So it's very far from being the ultimate product. It's a promising sign. It's a sign that government is taking this technology quite seriously. It's a sign that government wants to give each and every operator that operates in the country a license to operate when it comes to AI. And therefore, there's a certain set of principles that have to be followed by those operators. And again, I'm glad to say that if you look at all of these principles that are here, those are the same principles that are embedded in that draft document. So I think already from a Microsoft perspective, we're aligning to where government is going in terms of how they're looking at regulating AI in this country. So if you look about fairness, I think I've spoken to that already, that operators and people that actually train these foundation models, these algorithms, must make sure it produces fair outcomes, because otherwise it becomes destructive to what we're trying to do, and that is to democratize access to this technology. Because one of the things that AI does, especially from a platform company like Microsoft, because if you look at Azure, that's a platform that we use, but that platform is intended to be used for innovation. And if you're going to be bringing in operators to create bespoke solutions for people around this room, you need to make sure that those people adhere to this kind of principles, and that the technologies that they create, the solutions that they create, are based on fairness, so that there's trust in terms of how we move forward with that. Reliability and safety, this is something that I think it's a non-negotiable for everybody. If you're talking about driverless cars, you can't talk about driverless cars and then talk about using a technology that is not based on reliability and safety. So that is an underlying principle that from a Microsoft perspective, that we use. Privacy and security. This is again fundamental for any country. As you sit here, if you want to put your data, and you want to make sure that your data is being used in accordance with the privacy laws of the country, you want to make sure that your data is being used in accordance to security principles that govern the country. And therefore, again, as we deploy these models in South Africa from an AI perspective and globally, we are able to assure our customers that we follow those principles from a privacy and security perspective. POPI in South Africa, as an example, is what we align ourselves to. GDPR, if you go to Europe, that is what we align ourselves to. So already we are making sure that we deploy and be in accordance with the existing regulatory mechanism. Inclusiveness. This is one of the areas that are going to be quite hard for this continent, because we constantly talk about we have to make sure that, as Africa, I think it's easy to say, and it's fair to say that we've been late starters when it comes to consumption, most of these technologies. If you think about mobile, for instance, the place that still got the least what you call smartphones remains Africa. And now if you think about inclusiveness from an AI perspective, because remember, AI works on data that exists across the internet. So what we need to be talking about there is digitization of data. And how much are we doing that from an Africa perspective? For instance, if you think about the large language models, if you think about specifically languages, right now, if you go to you use AI, it can translate a lot of documents into different languages from around the world. But if you ask it to translate it to a few languages that exist in Africa, it's not able to do that. And the primary reason for that is because we haven't really sufficiently digitized our own languages. We haven't digitized our own data so that it sits on the internet. And therefore, these large language models are able to utilize that to give solutions. So that's part of when you talk about inclusiveness, that's what we're trying to think of. That's what we're trying to do, to partner with governments from across the continent to make sure that we are bringing an all-in package that doesn't, AI should be moving forward. And I normally tell a story about a teacher in the US. The year was 1976. This teacher, I think, had been given an award for being the best among her peers in terms of that particular year of her performance from a teaching perspective. And when she came out to a podium like this to accept her prize, one of the things she said was, "Look, I have a passion for teaching. I've loved teaching, and I'm going to continue to teach. But there's a technology that's been introduced that I think is going to be completely disruptive for teaching. It's going to make children lazy. It's going to just mess up everything that we as teachers know about teaching. And the technology she was talking about was a calculator. And we now know that it calculator went on to become one of the things that augment human capacity when it deals with maths and science, rather than trying to solve that and make people lazy. And I think that's exactly how we think about AI. It's meant to augment human ingenuity. It's meant to augment human intelligence. And therefore, the way we deal with it has to be inclusive, so that you don't get pockets of AI that are benefiting people that are sitting in a particular part of the world and not being able to be as competitive as everybody else. And then the two underlying areas are transparency. At any given point, like from a cloud perspective, you want to know what your data is being used for and how it is being used for. And the agreements that we sign with our customers as Microsoft guarantee that we will use the data transparency. And we want to go as far as to also guarantee that we will not use any customer data to train any of our foundational models or any of our algorithms. We use data that's already in the public domain. The data that we use, that you give us, we use that data specifically for purposes that we've signed on the dotted line, that we can only use that data. So transparency becomes very, very important. And then most important is accountability. We have to be accountable. If you think about, we come from elections in South Africa not too long ago, and we saw in the US as well a couple of days ago. One of the biggest problems that AI is reducing is deceptive use of AI. I don't know how many Helen Zille videos I saw during our own elections, or even President Cyril Ramaphosa videos that I saw that were actually not them speaking, but the whole configuration, the whole video, or the whole photo that is dealt with in a certain deceptive way, so that to give you as a voter a very misleading outcome about what your leaders might be saying, and therefore something that might put you off when it comes to actual voting. So being accountable as a service provider, bringing this technology to our people, is very, very important. And therefore educating people around how to spot deceptive pictures, for instance, that are AI manufacturers becomes important. So accountability is something that I think is an underlying issue around AI and how we bring it to market. I think I've spoken to this already. This is just making sure that we apply very sensitive when it comes to sensitive use cases. For instance, again, things like when you use AI in the health sector, it becomes very, very important there, not from just a data privacy perspective, because that is your most private data, but it also becomes very important how you sift that data to make sure that AI deals with it in a very, very sensitive way, so that it does not hurt people up the wrong way or issue outcomes that are not what they intend to be. So I think this just speaks to what we're seeing from around the world. As you can see, not a whole lot of geographies around the world have started putting out any firm regulations around AI. We know Europe has done so, and we know that a couple of states in the US have already also done so. So I think generally, what we're seeing is as the technology evolves, I think regulators are catching up, different countries are catching up to making sure that you apply these kind of measures to make sure that going forward it is regulated properly, so that the promise of what we see here is realized, and that when people receive this and the changes, I think every speaker has spoken about here, the fundamental changes that the technology is going to be making now and is going to make going forward are truly realized, but that truly realized in a way that you and I can trust, and then that you and I can make sure that this is something that you allow your kids, you allow your relatives to be able to interact with in a way that you know that the outcomes of it have been tested, have been managed, and are being done within a regulated format. I think that's it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.